Good morning, everyone. My name is Anjana Das, student of Hiralal Mojumdar Memorial College for Women of Botany Department. Today, I am very glad to get an opportunity to discuss on our biodiversity and its conservation phases. I have prepared a project on that topic and I will show it through a presentation. Let's begin the topic. These are contents of that project. First, introduction, concept of biodiversity, levels of biodiversity, brief description on species, genetic and ecosystem diversity, importance of biodiversity to human beings, threats to biodiversity, what is biodiversity conservation, approaches to conservation, and ex situ and in situ conservation will be discussed on this topic, limitations of conservation, IUCN conservation categories, conclusion, acknowledgement, and resources. This will be discussed as a part of this project. Let's move on the topic. First, we should be know what is biodiversity and what does it mean. The term biodiversity, or we may say biological diversity, first pronounced by Walter Rosen in 1986. The biodiversity comprises of a complex collection of innumerable organisms known as the biodiversity, which constitute the vital life support for survival of human race. Or we may say biological diversity, abbreviated as biodiversity, represent the total sum of various life forms such as unicellular fungi, protozoa, plantae, multicellular organisms are may included, and mammals also are the part of this biodiversity. And biodiversity, so now we will say what will be the definition of biodiversity, and it has some features also. Biodiversity is the living wealth, is a product of hundreds of millions of years of evolutionary history. The variability among living organisms from all sources, including terrestrial, marine, and other aquatic ecosystems, and the ecological complexes of which they are a part. This includes diversity with species, between species, and of ecosystems. And not only that, biodiversity has three levels. Now we will know about the three levels of biodiversity. So what will are they? Number one, the species diversity. Second, genetic diversity, and third is ecosystem diversity. Now we will know about the three types of biodiversity. What is the species diversity? Species species diversity. The term species is found on the hierarchical taxonomy. It denotes the taxonomy position as the unit, or we may say it represents as a taxon of the systematic position. The what will be the species diversity? Species diversity can be measured by counting the number of organisms of each species. The existence of a wide range of different types of organisms in a given place at a given time, the diversity of plant and animal life in a particular habitat, and give an example of species diversity. And and also the species diversity are formed at the two constitute the what are they. First we can say the species richness, and second is species evenness. So what is the species richness? Number of different species present in an ecosystem. Tropical areas have greater species richness as the environment is conducive for a large number of species. And second is species evenness, relative abundance of individuals of each of these species. If the number of individuals within a species is fairly constant across communities, it is said to have high evenness. And if the number of individuals varies from species to species, it is said to low evenness. And we can give some examples of species diversity. In a forest, There may have a large number of different species, high species richness, it will be said, but have only few number of each species, then it will be said low species evenness. Second, in a forest, there may be only few plant species, that will be said low species richness, and but a large number of each species, then it would be said high species evenness. Second, we will know about the genetic diversity. What is that? Genetic, the term is related to genes, and genes is the primary element for all living organism. It carries the specific characters from ancestor generation to next generation. So, what is the genetic diversity? Genes on chromosomes determine the specific characteristics of individual organisms. Diversity of genes in a species or processes such as mutations, genes, organism changes, and genetic dynamics that occur at the DNA level and generate evolution. And we can give some examples about genetic diversity. The different breeds of dogs are selectively bred to get the desired traits, different varieties of rose flowers, wheat, etc. There are more than 50,000 varieties of rice and more than 1,000 varieties of mangoes found in India. All are varies for genetic diversity, because genes are the primary element for these animals. Next, we will go to discuss about ecosystem diversity. Ecosystem diversity, or we may say the habitat diversity. Variety of habitats, living communities, and ecological processes in the living world, and includes alpine, dry sclerophyll, mallee, tropical rainforest, savanna, freshwater, aquatic, temperate, marine, Antarctic, etc. Each of these habitats have own characteristic species and food webs, often preserved by national parks and reserves. Go to the next slides. These are images of ecosystem diversity. One is shows the forest ecosystem and one is represent the marine ecosystem. Let's move on the next slide. Levels of ecosystem diversity, like as biodiversity, it has a same part of ecosystem diversity, and it has to be divided into three types. One is alpha diversity, second is beta diversity, third is gamma diversity. Now we will discuss about alpha diversity, beta diversity, and gamma diversity as shortly. What is called the alpha diversity? It is the biodiversity within a particular area, community, or ecosystem. It is usually expressed by the number of species in that ecosystem. Next, we will know about beta diversity. Beta diversity is the measure of biodiversity which works by comparing the species diversity between ecosystems or along environmental gradients. This involves comparing the number of taxa that are unique to each of the ecosystem. It is the rate of change in species composition across habitats or among communities. Next one is left, that is gamma diversity. It refers to the total species richness over a large area or region. It is measure of the overall diversity for the different ecosystems within a region. It is the product of a diversity of a component ecosystem. Now we have discussed about the biodiversity and its level. Now we'll know what is its importance to human being and why we should conserve the biodiversity. It has importance or no? First, but it has a various importance to human being. We will discuss one by one. First, we'll know about the ecological importance to mankind. What is the ecological importance? First, living things, the rocks and soils, water and air interact to provide a range of conditions that favor life on Earth. Second, if the ecological systems that support life on Earth collapse or radically change, our very existence is threatened. Third is soil biodiversity alone influences a huge range of processes and functions vital to ecosystem. Next we'll move. Give an example: goods, food, building materials, fuel, paper products, fiber, clothing and textile also are included. Industrial products like wax, rubber, oils, medicine. For this purpose, biodiversity are also important to human being. And like such as medicine, biodiversity prospecting is that process of searching for naturally occurring organisms that may be able to be used as a pharmaceutical or other beneficial innovation. Give an example: in fact, the drugs derived from Madagascar rose periwinkle flower, these plants have increased children's survivability of leukemia from 10 to 90%. These are ecological importance to us. It has also consumptive uses. What are they? The most important point of consumptive use is that some rural communities closer to the forest, other areas can prosper through the sustainable harvesting of wildlife species, hunting, direct consumption, like collection of berries, mushrooms, herbs, plants are also consumptive uses. For this purpose, biodiversity are important to us. And also we can say that it has a productive uses like animal skins, ivory, medicinal plants, honeybee, wax, fibers comes for this purpose. Biodiversity have to be preserved. But they and it has also ethical and moral values. Ethical values of biodiversity are based on the importance of protecting all form of life. Most religious or secular creeds believe that all form of life have the right to exist on earth. Man is only a small part of the earth's great family of species. Plants and animals have an equal right to live and exist on our planet. And we have in our country a large number of sacred groves or duets preserved by tribal people in several states. These sacred groves around ancient sacred sites and temples act as gene banks for wild planets. These are the ethical and moral values of biodiversity. But day by day, biodiversity are faced in danger and it are facing lots of problem by natural disaster or man-made activities. So what are the threats of biodiversity? For that biodiversity are losing these are the major points for loss of the biodiversity. Now we will know what are the problems for losing the biodiversity. First is climate change. Second, over exploitation. Third is the major point deforestation. Second, the pollution is made by the human being. For droughts, that's are the natural disaster, floods, wildfires, earthquakes, position in food chain, degree of specialization, destruction of habitats are the major reason for losing of the biodiversity. And what are the effects of loss of biodiversity? This will be effect for loss of the biodiversity. First, ecological effects. Second, spread of diseases. Third, loss of livelihood for locals. Fourth, loss of recreational space. Fifth, society effects. Sixth, effect on food production. Seven, economically affected. But it has also remedies of biodiversity loss problem that we should take for save the biodiversity. What are the remedies? First, government restriction and policies. Second, education. Third, protection of species. Fourth, protection of habitats. First, fifth, stop deforestation. Six, prevent overhunting and overfishing. Seven, free, prevent species invasion. And eight, last, stop pollution. Pollution is the major problem for loss of the biodiversity that should be prevent for from losing the biodiversity. It is our duty. Next, we should know what is the conservation and why should we conserve the biodiversity. Biodiversity conservation refers to the protection, preservation, and management of ecosystems and natural habitats, and it ensures that they are healthy and functional. The three main objectives of biodiversity conservation are as follows: to protect and preserve and species diversity. Also, biodiversity conservation has three objectives. Now we will know that. One is biological resources. To preserve the biodiversity of species, sustainable utilization of species and ecosystem, to maintain life supporting systems, and essential ecological process. Some strategies are taken for biodiversity conservation. First is all the varieties of food, timber, plants, livestock, microbes, and agriculture animals should be conserved. Second, all the economically important organisms should be identified and then conserved. Third, unique ecosystems should be preserved first. And fourth, the resources should be utilized efficiently. Fifth, poaching and hunting of wild animals should be prevented. Sixth, the reserves and protected areas should be developed carefully. That research has found that two ways can be taken for biodiversity conservation, or we can say two methods are should be applied for conservation. What are these? First, in situ conservation. Second, ex situ conservation. In situ conservation, such as biosphere reserves, national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, sacred forests, that are the conservation places for in situ conservation. And ex situ conservation, botanical gardens, zoos, seed or pollen banks, gene banks, tissue culture are the place for ex situ conservation. Now we'll know what is the ex situ or in situ conservation. First, we will discuss about the in situ conservation. The conservation of genetic resources in natural populations of plant or animal species, such as forest genetic resources in natural population of tree species, or we may say a species that is reared into own their habitat. These are some images of in situ conservation. All of you can see that. And it has some merits and demerits of in situ conservation. Now we will focus what is the advantages of in situ conservation. First, the species will have all the resources that it adapted to. Second, the species will continue to evolve in their environment. Third, the species have more space. Fourth, bigger breeding population can be kept. Fourth, and fifth, it is cheaper to keep an organism in its natural habitat. These are advantages of in situ conservation. Next, we will discuss about the disadvantages of in situ conservation. First, it requires a large space of earth surface. Second, the land used always be dedicated for single used. Third, preserve the full complement of biotic diversity of a region. Now we have discussed about in situ conservation. Now we will know What is the ex situ conservation? Ex situ conservation is the process where the species are to be reared outside from their own habitat. That it is the process of protecting an endangered species of plant animal outside its natural habitat. It has also advantages and disadvantages. This is the places of ex situ conservation. One is represent the zoological garden and other is botanical garden. What are the advantages of ex situ conservation? First, organisms are completely protected from poaching and predation. Second, health of individuals can be monitored. Third, population can be effectively managed or divided if disaster strikes. It has also disadvantages. First, captive population have limited genetic diversity. Second, animals can be exposed to wide range of different diseases. Third, nutritional issues may arise. Go to the next slides. These are conservation categories are enlisted by IUCN. What are they? First, extinct. Second, extinct in the world. Third, critically endangered. And fourth, endangered. Five, fifth, vulnerable. Six, conservation dependent. Seven, data efficient. Eight, low risk. Nine, not evaluated. This has to be taken by IUCN. Let's move the next slide. So, what should have learned from this topic? That we should be more conscious to our biodiversity besides our environment, because biodiversity is our life. If the biodiversity got lost at this rate, the day is no so far that total human being will be exhausted completely from the earth's surface. So it is our moral duty to conserve the biodiversity as well our environment. Long term maintenance of species and their management requires cooperative efforts across entire landscape. Biodiversity should be dealt with at scale of habitats or ecosystem rather than at species. Now we have reached at the end of this project. Before ending of this project, I would like to express my special thanks of gratitude to our botany teacher, Dr. Madhushri Das, who gave me the golden opportunity to do this wonderful project of botany on biodiversity and conservation. And I would like to gratefulness to the principal of Hiralal Mojumdar Memorial College for Women, Dr. Shoma Ghosh, and to all my other teachers of botany department. I came to know so many things during this project, and I really thankful to them. Accordingly, I would like to thank my parents and my friends who helped me a lot in completing this project within the limited time frame. These are resources which help me as a reference in completing this project. At last, thank you to everyone for giving your precious time to me. Thank you.